Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty ambitious,
Yeah.
a system claiming to be not just carbon neutral, but carbon negative.
Wow.
It's called True Green Energy, and they say they can actually remove more CO2 from the atmosphere than they release.
That's a pretty big claim. To really understand it, I think we need to define what carbon negative actually means.
Okay.
It's not just about reducing emissions, right? It's about actively removing existing CO2 from the atmosphere.
So almost like the planet has a giant air purifier.
Exactly.
For this deep dive, we're looking at a collection of promotional and educational materials from energy.peoplesgroup.org.uk.
The folks behind True Green Energy.
Yeah, and they've got explanations, diagrams, and some pretty big promises.
Some big promises for sure.
So let's dive in and see if they can back it up.
Sounds good. One thing that immediately jumped out at me from these materials is their criticism of traditional approaches to climate change.
Oh, yeah.
They argue that decades of research haven't led to any truly viable solutions.
I mean, they don't hold back. But is that really a fair assessment? I feel like we've seen advancements in renewables and carbon capture.
It's true, there has been some progress.
Yeah.
But have we really seen that single game changer that can reverse the damage that's already been done? True Green Energy claims to be that game changer.
Okay, I'm interested.
And they do it by turning to nature for inspiration.
Nature. How does nature fit into all of this?
So their core concept is to create a closed-loop system that mimics natural processes. Think of it like a forest. Trees absorb CO2, they use it for growth, and release oxygen.
Okay.
True Green Energy wants to replicate that cycle.
But instead of trees, we have what? Giant machines that breathe CO2?
Not exactly giant machines, but there are some pretty innovative technologies involved.
But
That's where things get really interesting. They're using gasification and liquefaction.
Those sound familiar, but if I'm being honest, they make my brain shut down a bit.
Yeah, they can be a little technical.
Could you maybe break those down for us without melting my brain?
Absolutely. So think of gasification as a way to transform a whole bunch of materials. Fossil fuels, biomass, even waste, into syngas.
Syngas.
Yeah, it's this versatile gas, and you get it by heating the material under high pressure with very limited oxygen.
Okay.
Now, what's unique about True Green Energy is that they're using a specific type of gasifier. It's called an insert type.
Okay.
And this type of gasifier is particularly good at handling all these different feedstocks.
Oh, so unlike the more common insert traditional method.
Exactly. That one's not as versatile.
Got it. So what about liquefaction? Is that basically the opposite of gasification?
In a way, yes. Liquefaction takes those same feedstocks and uses solvents and catalysts under high pressure to convert them directly into liquid fuels.
Like diesel and gasoline.
Yep, like diesel and gasoline.
The key here is that both processes can be more efficient and cleaner than just burning those materials, right?
Potentially, yeah.
So they're creating fuel and they're doing it in a cleaner way. I'm starting to get why this is so appealing, but wait a minute. Even with all these fancy processes, you still have to store the energy you produce, right?
Yeah.
So where does that fit into this whole closed loop system?
That's where things get really innovative. They've got two ways to store the energy, and both are pretty cool.
Lay it on me.
First, they're proposing compressed air batteries.
Compressed air batteries. Is that a real thing? How does that even work?
It's a pretty simple concept, actually. Excess energy is used to compress air into a tank. Then, when you need power, you release the compressed air, and that drives a turbine, like storing energy in a giant balloon.
Okay, that's wild. So what about that other storage solution?
Oh, right. I did say it was pretty futuristic, didn't I?
You did?
They're also using something called organic supercapacitors.
Okay.
And these store energy using, you guessed it, organic materials. So that means that they're free from all the nasty chemicals you find in regular batteries.
Okay, I'm always up for less toxic stuff in the world.
Right.
Are there any other advantages to these supercapacitors?
Well, the big one is longevity. They say these supercapacitors can last for more than 30 years.
Wow.
And they're fully recyclable. Compare that to your average lithium-ion battery that dies after a few years, and then you have this hazardous waste problem.
30 years and recyclable. Sign me up. But how does all of this tie back into the carbon negative claim? Where does the actual CO2 removal happen?
That's where the loop part of the closed loop system comes in. Remember all that CO2 produced during the energy production process?
Yeah.
Well, instead of releasing it into the atmosphere, they want to capture it
Okay.
and use it to boost plant growth.
Wait, so are we talking about those specialized crops they mentioned? The ones that are like CO2 absorbing superstars?
Exactly. They're integrating hydroponic farms into the system.
Hmm.
They use the captured CO2 to make the plants grow faster.
So it's like killing two birds with one stone. You're producing food A&D, removing CO2 from the atmosphere.
It's like having your cake and eating it too, but in a sustainable way.
Okay, so we've got innovative energy production, long-lasting storage, and a built-in system for CO2 removal.
Yeah, it's all pretty impressive.
But it also sounds a little bit like science fiction.
Yeah.
So what are your initial thoughts on all of this? Are you buying into the hype?
I'm cautiously optimistic. The way they integrate all these different technologies and focus on mimicking natural systems is definitely intriguing.
Yeah.
But there are some pretty big claims that need a closer look.
For sure. And that's what we'll be doing in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll be looking into the details of their claims, the potential challenges they face, and try to figure out if true green energy really is as revolutionary as it sounds.
I'm ready when you are. I think it's worth talking a bit more about this whole closed loop system True Green Energy keeps bringing up.
Yeah, I'm with you.
They're really pushing this idea of waste not, want not.
Yeah, they want to squeeze every ounce of value out of everything they use.
Right. They claim that any byproducts that come out of the fuel and power generation, things like water, carbon, even residues, are either put back into the system or repurposed.
It's like a giant eco-friendly jigsaw puzzle where every piece has its perfect spot.
I like that analogy.
They even say they can achieve an 85% energy conversion rate on the first try, with the rest being recycled and reprocessed.
Those are impressive numbers.
Yeah, if they can actually pull it off, it would be pretty amazing.
Definitely. But of course, someone independent would need to verify these claims, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's one thing to say you can do it, but proving it out in the real world is a different story.
Absolutely. Speaking of the real world, there's something else about True Green Energy that I found interesting. This whole thing about underground processing.
Oh, yeah, that does sound a little sci-fi, doesn't it?
Totally.
They're proposing to move some of the energy conversion processes deep underground.
Like, how deep are we talking?
Over 3 kilometers deep.
Wow, that is deep. Why would they go that far down?
Well, according to their materials, it's all about minimizing their impact on the environment.
Makes sense.
They say by doing this underground, they can produce liquid crude oil and volatile gases without disturbing the surface.
And without any emissions.
That's what they claim.
So they're getting at the Earth's resources without leaving a trace. That almost sounds too good to be true.
It's a bold idea, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They say they can get an average of 4 barrels of oil out of every ton of coal. But we'd need to know more about the technology they're using and what kind of safety measures they have in place.
Right. You have to consider the benefits and the potential risks with any new technology, right?
Especially when you're talking about operating several kilometers below the surface.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the big question. Can true green energy actually be carbon negative?
Right, because we've talked about all these innovative processes and this closed loop system.
Yeah, even these underground operations.
But the big question is, does it all add up to a genuinely carbon negative energy source?
And honestly, I'm still a bit skeptical.
Yeah, and to be fair, even in their materials, they admit that using fossil fuels could potentially work against that goal.
That makes sense.
So how do they get around that conflict?
Yeah, how do they balance that?
Well, they really emphasize those special crops we talked about earlier.
The CO2 absorbing superstars.
Exactly. They claim those crops can absorb way more CO2 than would ever be released by burning the fuel.
So it's like a balancing act.
Yeah, they're trying to offset any potential emissions from the fossil fuels by growing all these plants that suck up CO2 like crazy.
Okay, but can they actually achieve that balance in real life?
I think that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
We'd need to know more about how long those crops take to grow, how much land you'd need to grow them on a large scale.
Right.
And then you'd have to do a thorough carbon accounting to see if it's truly feasible.
So what about their claim that even vehicles running on true green energy fuel would be carbon neutral? How is that even possible?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's not very clear from their materials how they came up with that claim. Maybe they're assuming that the CO2 absorbed by those special crops would cancel out whatever comes out of the car's tailpipe.
Yeah, I guess.
But it's a complicated calculation.
It sounds like we'd need a whole team of scientists and engineers to really figure all of this out.
Probably. But even without getting too deep into the technical stuff, it's important to look at all of this with a critical eye.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget, this information is coming directly from the company who's trying to sell true green energy.
So there's a chance they might be biased or putting a little spin on things?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah,
I mean, of course, they're going to present their technology in the best light possible, right?
that makes sense.
But our job is to sift through all the information, figure out where they need to do more research, and see if anyone else can confirm their claims.
So it's kind of like a detective game. We're looking for clues, following the evidence, and trying to piece together the whole picture. What about their criticisms of other alternative energy sources? They don't seem too keen on things like wind and solar power.
Right. They point out that those often rely on rare earth minerals, which can have a pretty big impact on the environment and even human rights issues with how they're mined and processed.
So they're saying their way is more ethical and sustainable.
That seems to be their argument.
Okay.
They also say they're free from the safety concerns of hydrogen energy.
Really?
Yeah. They specifically mentioned Toyota's ammonia solution, saying it's better than hydrogen.
But is that a common view? Is ammonia really that much better than hydrogen?
It's a complicated debate.
Okay.
The ammonia definitely has a higher energy density than hydrogen, and it's easier to store and move around.
Okay.
But it also has its downsides,
Right, yeah.
like potential toxicity and environmental impacts.
So it's not a simple answer. Every energy source has its own trade-offs.
Exactly. There's no perfect solution. It comes down to really understanding each option, knowing the potential good and bad, and choosing the right approach for the specific situation.
True green energy has certainly given us a lot to think about.
They have.
Their vision of a closed-loop, carbon-negative energy system is super appealing.
It is.
But we've also found some things that need a closer look.
For sure.
So, out of all of this, what do you think is the most important takeaway?
I think the big thing is to look past the hype and really dig into the details.
Okay.
When a new technology comes along claiming to solve these huge global problems, we have to ask tough questions.
Yeah.
Look for proof from other sources and consider all the potential impacts, both good and bad.
That's a really good point. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a potential solution,
Definitely.
but we have to be smart about the information we're given.
Absolutely. We all need to be informed, engaged citizens, and part of the conversation about our planet's future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, so as we wrap up our look at true green energy, there are a few more things we should probably touch on before we call it a day.
Definitely. One thing that really stood out to me was how much they focused on keeping transportation costs down.
Oh yeah, you're right.
It seems like a small thing, but it's actually a pretty big part of their whole sustainability plan.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
Moving all those raw materials around uses up a ton of resources and creates a lot of emissions.
Exactly. True Green Energy says they can keep those costs down by being strategic about where they put their processing plants.
Often near existing mines, right.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they talked about putting plants right at mine heads. So the stuff coming out of the mine can go straight into the gasification unit.
Yeah, cut out the middleman.
Exactly. And by using existing mining infrastructure, they're probably reducing the environmental impact of transporting those materials all over the place.
That's a pretty smart approach.
For sure. And it shows how much they're focused on being practical and efficient.
Definitely.
They also talk a lot about the economic benefits,
Oh, absolutely.
especially all the jobs that could be created.
They talk about jobs all along the way, from building and running the plants to managing those hydroponic farms.
And then distributing the fuel and all the other products that come out of it.
Yeah, it's like they want to create a whole new industry based on this technology.
It's a pretty compelling vision.
It is.
They're not just selling a product, they're selling a whole new way of thinking about the future. More sustainable and economically stronger, too.
It's interesting how they contrast that vision with what they see as the problems with the current alternative energy options.
Yeah, they're pretty critical of things like wind, solar, and even hydrogen.
It's like they're saying, hey, we've got a better way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that there are good arguments on both sides.
Yeah.
It's not like one is automatically better than the other.
It's really about finding the right mix of solutions for different situations, right?
I think so. Things like what resources you have, where you are in the world, and what your energy needs are all come into play.
Yeah, they all matter.
True Green Energy seems to be banking on their approach as the key to a sustainable future. With those closed-loop systems, integrated processes, and using materials that are easy to get,
Yeah.
they talk about using stuff that's already out there, off-the-shelf components, and not relying on rare earth minerals.
That's a good move. Using existing technologies and readily available materials could really lower costs and make the whole development process easier.
And it also means they're less reliant on those problematic supply chains.
Exact.
They even say they're open to working with clients without any upfront costs.
Oh, wow.
It sounds almost too good to be true.
I know, right? But like with any business model, you'd have to look at the fine print and see what the long-term costs and benefits are.
True green energy is definitely one of those things where there's always another question to ask, always another layer to peel back.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating and complex system, and I appreciate you walking me through it.
Well, it's been great having you here to help me figure it all out. So as we finish up our deep dive into true green energy, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've looked at the science, the claims, the potential, good and bad. Now it's your turn to decide. Could this be a real solution for a sustainable future, or is it just too good to be true?
What do you think?
I'm not sure yet. I think we need more information, but it's definitely a compelling idea.
I agree.
All right, everyone, that's all the time we have for today.
Thanks for having me.
Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. See you next time.